joining us at this time of, well, usually it's a bit late actually this week, isn't it, Ingrid? Nice to have you on. You having a holiday?
Good morning, Michael. Look, I've got some visitors over from Tahiti, which has just been great fun because they're very long-standing friends. We used to live in Fiji together and did a lot of work in the HIV sector, and now her and her family are visiting Dunedin, so they stayed at Larnac Castle and I'm driving them around.
Yes. Oh, that's very nice. Actually, Dunedin's a nice place at this time of the year. I like Dunedin winters. It's just you never get a summer.
Oh no, we've got beautiful weather. It's crisp and cold, and the water is a mill pond, and I feel very proud.
No, Dunedin is lovely. I give Dunedin its due. It's a lovely environment in winter. Listen, I know you don't want to talk about Leah Panapa, but your leader has. You've just, and the Greens have got their own problems. I think that's a cultural problem more than anything else, just quietly, Ingrid. But I was struggling to think of any MP that's gone from Labour. Oh, Sharma, that would be the one. The Gaurav Sharma, wasn't it? You had him in your caucus.
And we had Mecca Whaitiri.
Oh, that's right. So, she took off as well.
Something that parties face, but yeah, Darlene Tana, that issues for the Greens, really.
Yeah. In both those cases, did you invoke the Waka-Jumping legislation? You didn't, did you?
No, I remember Mika sat with the Māori Party. She defected to them, and Gaurav went and sat up the back in the far corner that's kind of like Siberia, and occasionally would have a question at question time, and I'd think, where is that voice coming from? And then I'd see him sitting up there. It's quite a lonely place. And so, no, we didn't invoke that.
No. Was Labour opposed to the Waka-Jumping legislation when it came in? I
don't think so. Now, look, I should be across this, but I understand that the Greens were, and I know yesterday it was reported they kind of swallowed a rat by supporting the legislation as part of the coalition agreement. That's how it was reported. So that would tell me that we supported it, that the Greens didn't, and that's why it's so problematic for them now. We would have had more wiggle room to invoke it if we wanted to, whereas for the Greens it's a real dilemma, I think.
Yes, it is. Yes, it's a moral dilemma rather than a political one, you would think. Well, I suppose it's both, actually. Hey, listen, I'm interested in Chris Bishop because he's this week, or last week, wasn't it? Pretty much, I'd have to say, endorsed Labour's housing policy. Of the previous election, prior to the previous election, with his aim for the intensification of residential developments and also freeing up land on the periphery of urban areas. You guys like to support that legislation?
Oh, look, that's a discussion for caucus, and it's really also a discussion for our spokesperson, Kieran McAnulty. If we look at it holistically, it doesn't reflect Labour's policy because we were using different levers and many levers to try and take the heat out of the housing market. So we were wanting to increase supply. Yes, that's the same kind of logic, but we were also very different on where we were putting the bright line tests and interest deductibility and foreign ownership. And, we look at it as a whole system using these different levers rather than just going, we're going to flood the market, but we're still going to give big tax breaks to landlords, which is going to incentivise them to keep speculating. So they're quite different policies in my view.
Okay, so but there was an agreement at one stage between both parties, which the National Party backed out of prior to the election, to intensify urban housing in particular. I think 3 stories and 3 properties on a particular section was the one that got people going. Is that still Labour policy? Is that still something that you guys adhere to?
Our policy will be in our manifesto before the next election. Clearly the thinking was done that we do need to intensify and we do need to have more housing supply to be able to resolve the crisis. We also maintain that we need healthy and livable homes, and we can see this government dismantling some of the regulation around that and saying, we're going to do fast-tracking consenting, not only of big projects but also of homes. We'll do video consenting and so on. That to me sounds like a way of trying to just sort of loosen up on the standards to get things over the line. And so I think there is a real concern that intensification might also lead to poorer standards of housing, and that's certainly not Labor policy. We want healthy, livable homes.
No, that's understandable too, and I guess that's the problem. I say I'm not a great supporter of intensification of housing because of exactly what you've just described. The housing outcomes could potentially lead to slum dwelling, and we've all seen those multi-storey blocks in the UK and the social conditions that arise from them.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to have planning that enables mixed socio-economic demographics, that not through any kind of requirement, but that just has different level housing, different affordability, so that you have really good social cohesion. We don't want to ghettoise some areas and gentrify other areas, as you've suggested. This came up for me very specifically with the propositions around Forbury Park, and when people were looking at whether it could be used to have housing there, my main concern was not only the longevity, so there were ways that you could build the houses where they would be movable in the event of flooding, but make sure that it's a mixed model, so you're not going to ghettoise part of town when there's already quite a big gap in inequality between central Dunedin and South Dunedin.
Yes, it's interesting you say that, because I'll use Dunedin as an example, because it's an area we both know, so we can reference it, and I hope other people can understand. There are good areas, if you like, upper socioeconomic areas of Dunedin and lower socioeconomic areas of Dunedin, and you've just mentioned the latter in terms of South Dunedin. But Maori Hill, for example, has generally been regarded as an upper socioeconomic part of Dunedin, where the professional and managerial classes live, and they pay a premium to live up there. Is your suggestion that you want to mix the people who live in, St Kilda or South Dunedin with those people living on the hill?
I just think that when we look at urban planning, we need to make sure that places are attractive and not ghettoised or gentrified. And it's really interesting. I live in Kew. Above me is Corstorphine, which is one of the poorest areas of New Zealand, in fact, even though it has $1 million views over the city. And just over the hill from Corstorphine is St Clair, which is one of the richer areas, if not, one of the richest areas in the electorate. They're very close to each other. My experience living in the North Island, eventually Corstorphine is in danger of being gentrified because it has those fantastic views. We may lose our state houses if we don't, if we're not vigilant about hanging on to social housing. And what tends to happen, I think, is that, you get concentrations of social issues in one area. If I think of Manurewa, for example, there's a particular part of Manurewa. Now that was a bit of a social experiment, as I understand it, in the 1970s for prisons and the electorate that my colleague Arina Williams serves. A lot of deprivation and a lot of at-risk families, and that is where we're seeing a lot of the ram raised kids coming out of. So it's been a failed social experiment, and I just think it's better if we can have diversity across our communities, and we can do that through the way the private market is set up. Certainly nothing like what they do in Singapore, where they actually mandate it, but you can do it just by having housing developments that have big houses, small houses, rich houses, lower budget houses, put them near each other, and that's the way that people tend to get on better, because they get to know each other.
Well, I think